Hi, everybody. Hope you can hear me. I'm just going to give it a few seconds to see if anybody joins. I'm just hoping that I can be heard. I just wonder, is that microphone? It does seem to be on, so I think we're ready to go. But I'll just give it a little while longer. It's quite disconcerting trying to organise the computer with the talking. So, there's something funny there. Yeah, I can see. Does that mean somebody is watching? I'll just give it a while longer. Welcome to the corner of my sitting room here in Downpatrick. I'm Linda McKenna, and thanks for joining me this evening. Please let me know in the comments if you can't hear or can't see. You check that's working. Oh, right, okay. We're just checking here on the phone to see if everything is working. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start. I can't see how many people are here or if anybody is here or not, but I'll start. I'm Linda McKenna. As I say, this is the corner of my sitting room in Downpatrick. Thank you very much to Roz and Simon for having me on the holding cell, which is a fantastic initiative, and they've been very good at helping me get set up in this time of pandemic and lockdown. Obviously lots of things have been cancelled, so it's a great way of getting to hear people reading their work, that work that might have been launched in this period but has been postponed or done in a different way. So thanks very much, Roz and Simon, and thank you for doing this. So I'm going to read some poems tonight. They're from my debut collection, which is, hope you can see there, is called In the Museum of Misremembered Things. It's published by Dore Press, that's DOIRE press.com. So if you want to order copies, you can order them directly from the publisher. Can I thank everybody at Dore Press for publishing this book, John and Lisa and Ruth and Trina for the lovely cover, and thanks to the Arts Council of Northern Ireland for supporting the work. I began writing just a few years ago, so I've been writing for about 4 years, I think. So it was really amazing to have my collection picked up by Dore and published. It was published in March, so it's still very new, although some of the poems were written a couple of years ago. I thought I'd start with this poem here. I was thrilled last year to have had a poem accepted by Poetry Ireland Review when it was edited by Evan Boland. So it was a real thrill to have a poem picked by Evan Boland, who sadly died this week. So I'm going to start with this poem here, which is called Anchor and Anchor. The cloister folds itself in, a closed accordion of stacked pleats, sharp pressed edge to sharp pressed edge. Tomorrow the day's wings will gather in battlefield stumps and mouldy barley, disobedient daughters' debt. Now is the time for the soul-facing window, a narrow point of lamplight where God swoops and soars. And behind the door, so secret it can hardly be seen, yawning, narrow-sleeved girls wait, goffering irons in hand. I'm going to read the very first poem in the collection. This collection is about lots of ways in which we misremember the past, either our own past or history. And I'm really interested in the gaps between what we know in the historical record, what we don't know, what we imagine, what we misremember, what we misconstrue and miscategorize. So this is the title poem of my collection, In the Museum of Misremembered Things. In the Museum of Misremembered Things, the keeper writes a slanted hand, fine-nibbed copperplate tracking imagined lines of pink and blue. In lemon juice, this archive of unprovenanced vows, misheard names, missed cues. Someday she may rip out the pages, lay them flat, heat up the iron. For now, invisible, the lover picking out her name on snow so white it looked like truth, unbending wedding lilies, pearls for sorrow, tangled lace. She leaves space for days and dates mislaid or folded small in drawers of long-sewed, white-lined boxes. One of the, I suppose, topics covered in the book as well is the way that women very often disappear from the historical record. They tend not to be as recorded, obviously, as men were in the past. And I'm also really interested in the notion of the relationship between sisters, either real historical sisters or fictional sisters. And one of the pairs of sisters that I'm particularly interested in and I find really fascinating is Antigone and Ismene in the Oedipus cycle of plays. And I'm inclined to think that Antigone, following more than Antigone, I think we always think we've got plenty of Antigones around. And this poem here is called A Girl Goes Out, and it's got an epigram which is taken from Oedipus at Colonus, where Ismene says, "The toil and trouble, father, that I bore, I spare thee." I would think that Antigone wouldn't be one for sparing you all the things that happened to her. But interestingly, when Oedipus's daughters, Antigone stays with Oedipus, but it's Ismene who goes out to consult the world, the worst words, a mother's words, wait and see, wait it out. A girl stays, a girl goes out into a world that is a river, stubborn, determined to empty itself into the sea. Where there is a dam, it stops, waits, seeps its way through. There is no chorus to chant the way. The skies are unreadable, the stars fickle. Birdsong means nothing, only here is morning, keep away from my nest. The world picks flesh from bony fish, salts its thin porridge, chews herbs to stave off hunger, while it carts pomegranates and figs to the greedy city. The world prizes horse flesh over woman flesh. A horse can be trained to a plough, raced for silver. How many times do you lie down from the colt? The world is not the city, but the town, shrieking its wares, burning out its neighbours, insisting that none of its ancestral laws be written, so a stranger never knows why he is to hang. At the frantic end of summer town, fortunes are dearer, but meaner, the tall stranger not so handsome, the cat by the fire flea-ridden, some children will die. And as the cart drivers might have told you, the best thing to do is to wait and see, wait it out. Not flee on hands cupped around a fool's tail, careful not to spill a drop. On the way, you stop, pull down your sunbonnet, brush the colt's coat, lead him over the narrowing way. This is Ismene aside. One of the things is at the end of Antigone, really. So this is Ismene aside. Cries over the barefoot, sunburnt girl, takes up its quill, changes the chorus. And this is where I will be buried, a footnote, small printed quibble, briefly dragging the eye to the bottom of the page, intruding on the principal action, a what if, on the other hand, or lesser view, hanging dismissible over the page, where you, my always spotlit sister, are centred, weaving golden circles of verse, with a skill other girls loop ribbons, twist wool, the life from each other, a pattern we have to follow to the end, then go back and read again, then say out loud, the words individual pieces of bright glass dropping onto the stage, glowing where they fall, singing in our heads on the street, So we repeat them as vows, as ritual. Behind the curtain, I sweep up the dust, wonder, how will we live now? So there's sort of three poems that go together, which are centered around the character of Ismene. And this is Ismene Heads North. Ismene heads north, where girls sewn into wolfskin paint red through the forest. In the long night time, she pays the gods their due, swallows black bread and herring, prays a litany of save us. The summer days she keeps for herself, eats sun-warmed raspberries, watches the dust mote swirl heedlessly to the ground, dreams of witches and woodcutters whose axes slice through stone and bone, entrails and ice, dragging bloody-mouthed princesses reluctantly to life. So, as I said, I've been writing for a number of years. I started off going to an introduction to creative writing class run by Queen's University. And then I did a couple of online courses. And one of the online courses that I did, the tutor at the end said that one of the things that we had to do was send work out and go to an open mic. So I did those things, and the open mic I went to was in the Crescent Arts Centre, where I was so nervous I forgot 2 verses of the poem that I was reading. So hopefully it won't do that tonight. This poem is a childhood memory. This is a really strong memory that I have of my grandmother, who always did the ironing in our house. And like lots of women of her age and generation, she didn't use an ironing board. She thought they were sort of terrible modern things. So she ironed on the kitchen table, and she had ironing cloths, blankets and sheets that she ironed on. And, you know, in a time before tumble dryers, obviously getting washing done and getting washing dried was an enormous task for everybody. So she spent a lot of her time watching washing and bringing washing in, and then, you know, ironing it. But of course, she was of a generation that didn't have washing machines, and she would have washed the clothes by hand. And there was a wringer in our garden, what you would call a mangle, but a wringer that wasn't used anymore, that we played with when I was little. So this is Speckless. Speckless was what she aimed for. Speckless floors and windows, but especially sheets, plunged again and again into water hot as she could make it, soap and scrub, knuckles raw, twisting out the dead watery weight of them, stinging in arms and shoulders, then again through the wringer, then watched like a hawk for the shadow, the sniff of rain, the inelegant dash to rescue them from the deluge, then in off the line to dance them into narrow folds, edge to edge, face to face, hands almost but not quite touching, chaste and white and clean smelling. Something formal, a word you have read but don't quite understand, gavotte or pavan. Then the disinterring of the ironing cloths, grey blankets laid on the table, old linen, smooth and scorched. The good day's work of piles of speckless sheets growing and growing at the uncovered end of the scrubbed table. Yeah, so that was a really strong memory that I had of my grandmother. And one of the things I always think is you inherit a lot of the way things you have in your house. I always think in the female line. So I think the way that you put things into your presses and cupboards is probably the way your mother does it. So when you go to somebody else's house, it's always entirely confusing as to where things are, but your mother's house is never confusing because that's the way you do things. And I think as well, you tend to inherit tastes in houses. So, you know, you maybe recreate some of your childhood in the kinds of things that you have in your house. And I have a lot of bitty things in my houses, sort of funny ornaments and old-fashioned things, I suppose, really. So this poem is called Housekeeping. I live in a house of obsolescence, with sideboards and fire screens, doilies, tray cloths, sherry glasses, and china bowls made to serve food I'll never eat. They are not heirlooms left to me by maiden aunts or grandmothers who knew better days, but they anchor me to this place more than bricks and mortar, worry me more than mortgage payments, and comfort me more than central heating. When I touch them, they give off faint scents of beeswax, lavender, starch, transporting me to where the devil is bested every day by never idle hands, and servant girls cut wafers of godliness from blocks of pink soap before breaking their fast. Yeah, so lots of the poems take me back to my childhood. But this poem here, I wrote for my son when he was leaving home to go to university. He went over to Edinburgh University and we went over on the boat, and my sister came back with me, so that I wasn't driving by myself. And on the way back, we stopped in this really strange, tiny hotel, literally in the middle of nowhere, and it was behind a whole row of old sheds. So it was a very strange hotel indeed, and there was a wedding there. So this poem is for my son, a weather eye. On the way home, the weather changes. The wind hums a faint Sunday hymn. And in a small hotel behind green corrugated sheds, there is a wedding. Who gets married on a Sunday evening, so far from anywhere but the road to and from the ferry? We can see the bride. The guests are middle-aged, heavy-set. The women, bulk balanced on kitten heels, are in flowered dresses made for the young, the slim. They belong in heavy coats, heather mix, with gleaming buttons, should carry handbags whose clasps click, opening unfolded handkerchiefs, boxes, glacier mints. They look like ants. Perhaps they are. The unseen bride, slip of a girl, a dead sister's child, the flighty one, wearing a dress they picked out, launched into married life on this windy night, to a bridegroom they picked out, solid like them, ballast to stop her drifting out to sea. And here on the ferry road, miles from where I've left my son, beginning a different life, I want to beg of them to keep on him a weather eye. Some of the poems in this book are inspired by a book called The Ancient and Present State of the County of Down, which is a survey undertaken by Walter Harris in 1744. And Walter Harris was surveying the county, not just its landscape, its hills, its mountains, its lakes, its fish, but also its ancient monuments, its buildings, and its people as well. And he's also surveying things like industries and manufactories that he thought should be don't exist anymore, obviously. So this is a poem based on his account of a pearl fishery in County Down. So it has an epigram, and the epigram from Walter Harris is: Dr. Lister calls pearls found in mussels the distempers of mussels waxing old. So this is waxing old, a distemper. Somewhere in the ooze and mud, you will step on its buckled twist. It will shrivel from your touch, cleave hard to some rock. You will prize it out, defy the watchers, secrete it in your pocket, this your fairy tale, the crone hunched in her distemper, spinning straw into gold. This pearl, as serene as silk, the exact dense velvet of the nativity sky. It will find its way to a setting of silver, a clasp of diamonds, silencing the rooms lit by thousands of candles. Waxing old, we are charmed by this story, still longing for a hand to coax, someone to believe our long held in words are treasure. Forgetting the streets of idle shops, the trays of other unsold lots, clumsy, old-fashioned, hard to shift, there no longer being much of a market in pearls. This is another one of the poems inspired by Walter Harris's account, and the little epigram is really beautiful. You come across as incredibly beautiful words in some of these documents. So in this epigram, he's talking about a graveyard in Grey Abbey. And he says, the dead were Anna, Helena, Hugh, Jane, and Archibald, being all God's lovely loans, reclaimed. Featherlight, or standing surprised on their own 2 feet, the lovely loans are reclaimed back to sleep, stowed for eternity in God's pocket, And we pray hard to believe that now they are sparrows and lilies, swaddled in shawls of silver, outshining even Solomon. That all those others, stitched into cheap linen, wrapped in plastic, interred in the bodies of dead mothers, will share in the fading carved gifts of Anna's eyes, Helena's strong grip, Hugh's smile, Jane the wriggler, always on the move, Archibald laughing at his own hiccup. I'll just read this poem here, which is called That Last Thing, which obviously the last thing is hope. So this is That Last Thing. They belong to the air, know the time by dandelion clocks, the feather thieves, light-fingered, bird-boned, slashing at pillows, swooping on warehouses, hawking strippings and drivings, the very refuse of feathers. At the Cape of Good Hope, the ships pause, take on fresh fruit, pass it among the cargo, robbers of gates and grates, fire irons and plated candlesticks. The feather thieves peck at oranges, feel the earth thickening, watch the skies shifting, untangle their hair, face south. In Newgate, Elizabeth Flynn, £10 worth of ostrich plumes, sentence death, blows a stray feather, marvels at its faint flutter, its hopeful, irresistible mimicry of flight. So hope you're enjoying some of these poems. Hoping that you can hear. As I say, a lot of the poems are inspired by episodes in history or people in history or people from my own family. And this is another one of those poems that is a sort of a memory of childhood. My father worked on various building sites, and one of the things that they often did was refurbish or knock down some of the big houses in the area. And sometimes he would bring us home things that he'd sort of salvaged from his work. So this is called Clearances. Clearances. For a whole summer, my father worked somewhere between a crying shame and a mortal sin, riding off every morning to join the other hobnailed pillagers, stripping and ripping out huge plaster ceiling roses bordered with ivy and vines, chipping away at deep cornices and elegant picture rails, carting off loads of woodworm-pitted mahogany newel posts, sweeping up acres of chandelier glass and oil lamp pendants. In the evenings, he conjured for us fabulous tales of spoiled and rotting opulence, brocade curtains hanging in ribbons, Persian carpets mildewed and stinking, stained glass bleeding into skips. Some things he couldn't help but rescue: stilts, a doll's house with real wallpaper, an improbable rusty sword, and best of all, thick rolls of draftsman paper where I drew the family trees of ancient European royalty, Ferdinand, Isabella, their not yet doomed daughters. I'm going to read just a couple of new poems. These are very, very draft, so please comment and tell me they're terrible. This is Palm Sunday. And it was written, obviously, this Palm Sunday, which is very different from other Palm Sundays. Palm Sunday. Palm Sunday, and the churches are hunting for Jesus, a street boy playing dice in a sunlit corner of the market, squatting among yesterday's rotting blooms. With a bone-handled knife, he cuts slivers of flesh from a bruised apple, savouring its just-on-the-turn taste. This year, Easter will be late. The starch surpluses will wilt, the choir children run off with spinning tops, the donkey trot into a nearby field to graze. It will not come daffodil and primrose yellow, but with the faint pink of mayflowers that no one allows over the threshold. Like other people, I've been following Catherine Ann Cullen's great poetry prompts on the Poetry Day Ireland site. I'm a very slow writer, so I don't write something every day. I think I've written 2, but I do use the prompts in my work, that they are really great. And one of the prompts she posted this week was Pomegranate, in tribute to Evan Boland's poem. And when I was Googling pomegranate, I discovered that pomegranate is also on the coat of arms of the Royal College of Physicians in London. So pomegranate is a symbol, obviously, for lots of things, but it is a symbol for physicians as well. So the current title for this poem, hopefully I'll get a better title, is Physician. Physician, which is a word I can't even say. You promise me at the heart of this maze, not Minotaur, but Persephone, sleeping in a hammock woven from the roots of comfrey, feverfew digitalis. You lay out for me the terrible journey, its false starts and dead ends, the stiff locks that almost didn't yield, the map all quicksand and sharp teeth. But you say, these hands, this knife, this tiny cut, this tincture, this cure. Winter is not a shroud, but a cocoon. By summer, she will be outgrowing her frocks. So I'm trying to get some poems together for a second collection, which will be a very slow process, I think. And again, this is a very draft poem called Horoscopes. The night we moved house, we lay under a counterpane, all goals and wishes. With no curtains, the stars were insistent, so I spun stories of how they arranged themselves on the nights you were born. In truth, you came in the late morning, early afternoon, twilight, but for a straight path and a good end. Stars are necessary, so I gave you the bear Cassiopeia, the water carrier, when I can only ever see the plough. Next day, I set you to drawing. The eldest made a row of marching stars, the youngest bright splotches bleeding into each other. The girl coloured her stars only faintly yellow, formed them into a woman holding a key. So I write very draft new poems. So thank you all for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed this short reading. Again, thanks very much to Roz and Simon for hosting me on the holding cell. I've really enjoyed all the other writers that I've seen over the past few days. Saw quite a few on Poetry Day on Thursday, and looking forward to Catherine Ann Cullen tomorrow. So I think I'll finish with a couple of poems about some of the figures from history. This poem is called Joan, and I suppose, like lots of people, we had a picture of Joan of Arc in our house. There's a black and white drawing of Joan in armour with her head thrown back and sort of flames around her. So she was very much a presence in our house when I was small. This is Joan. We would burn. The flames would catch us careless, preening in the glass, cleave our nylon nightdresses to our flesh. Their tiny flowers and lace conflagrate teach us a lesson. Our dolls hid their singed hair under knitted hats. Still, we couldn't resist the lure of poker and tongs behind adult backs, turning and turning the coal over, exploding stars into the soot, urging logs to open their hot red hearts. She hung beside the mirror, eyes closed, shorn boy's head flung back in ecstasy, a dark shock against the swirling grey clouds. Her woolen dress would have been slower to catch fire. Did it feel insubstantial on her shoulders, braced for the weight of metal and leather? Did she smooth out its creases, shake out the dust, practice once again walking in it, shortening her stride, praying not to stumble? And I think I'm going to finish with this poem here, which is East. Obviously, I live in the East in County Down. I'm from North County Dublin in the East, and I'm always struck by the similarities in the two places, including the similarities of my daily walk, whether I'm here at home or at home. I often, pass the same kinds of monuments, the same kinds of things, and I think the East, whether it's Southeast or the Northeast, has a lot in common. This is East. I walk 2 circles here and there, Venn diagram of my now and then homes, intersections of church and cricket ground, gatehouses, useful hedgerows allowed run to seed. Nettles don't grow here without dock leaves. Thorns are packed with blackberries and rose hips. For this is east, pale and paler still, planned, squared off, knowing its place. Congregating around a ruined abbey, a restored castle, a sharp diamond. Straightening haphazard paths and hills, damming water, taming lush Australian plants with cold and fog. I cherish this. Not for me, the wrecked and wild west, houses backing into the sea, inviting flood and pirate, the gaps and talk you fall foolishly into, the tiny children's walls, fencing off nothing, everything, especially a grievance. But this securely pinned and sewn tight Norman world, its shrewd saints and maiden ghosts who rise unsurprised out of weathered tombs only when required. Thank you very much. As I said, this is from in the Museum of Misremembered Things, published by Dura Press. I hope you could hear me and see me. Hope you enjoyed those. Thanks very much, Roz and Simon, for doing this. Hi, Amy. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. And hopefully when I end this stream, it will end. Thank you very much, everybody. Good night.